Hello, everyone. I think we are on schedule to begin right now. People are still joining right now as we're here, so just make yourself comfortable. I encourage you to really make the most out of this session that we have together right now. Allow the information to flow into your mind and to learn as much as you can. There's a lot of information to be covered here when we're using your mind for a change. And I'll make this as informative as possible for you so you can learn and also have a good experience while you are here with me now. I know all of you are here very eager and want to learn as much as you can now. So we're going to be talking about tapping into the power of your unconscious. And this is a really big subject. Why is the unconscious mind so important to learn about and to work with? Well, this is a webinar, obviously, so I can't see you and ask you to raise your hand and talk directly to you. I'll talk to you first about who I am, for those of you who don't know me and have never met me before. I know I look a little bit different than the photograph on your screen right there. So you can read what you read there. That's what they say. That's the story of me. I've helped people with many different problems, ranging from depression, mood disorders, anxiety disorders, weight management, relationship problems, spiritual problems, mental and emotional release, negative thinking, addictions, phobias, and traumas, as well as other things. My name is funny. It's Larry, and it doesn't sound like a very Indian name. So my parents are actually from India, and that reminds me of my dad. Just imagine a guy that's 75 years old that sort of looks like me but with white hair and has a very thick Indian accent. And the funny thing is that you know, my dad actually grew up the youngest of 16 kids. 16 kids. So think about a village in India, desert really. And all you ever do if you're born into that village is you either leave that village or your whole life is spent in that village and you're going to continue to live in that village until you're no longer living in that village. And if you can imagine what it feels like to be child number 16 or 15 or 14, or imagine child number 13 or 12 or 10 or 8 or 7 or 6. And I remember my dad telling me that he had an opportunity because he was a farmer. They grew up in a farm, basically. It was the desert, but they had crops and things like that. And land of farmers. You have to be able to farm if you live in a place like that. So he was out there in a potato field one day and just looking out into the horizon at all of the possibilities and thinking to himself, what is he going to do with his life? What is he going to manifest? Out of all the potential in the world, what could he have? And speaking of potato fields, I don't know how many of you live in Orange County here, but there's a restaurant here locally, and it's a vegan restaurant. I'm vegan-ish. And the funny thing is when you walk into this restaurant and you order something, they'll offer you either a side of sweet potato french fries or a side of lentil soup or quinoa. And they really pitch the sweet potato fries because they know people love them. And, you know, it'll always be a struggle, like sweet potato fries or quinoa, sweet potato fries or quinoa. Now imagine a sweet potato french fry. You got this big, orange, juicy looking thing, looks something like this, but just big, fat, plump, juicy, crispy, hot, and you're just taking a bite into this juicy sweet potato french fries, and you can feel all that juice going in your mouth. And this crunchy feeling and this sweet taste in your mouth from the sweet potato French fries. It feels so good, and you just feel like, what we're going to talk about today is the unconscious mind. And why it's important is you can use the unconscious mind for a change. You can use your mind for a change. Many different problems, ranging from emotional overeating and mood problems, anxiety problems, releasing negative emotions and limiting decisions or limiting beliefs that people grow up with from a very young age. Understanding how to access the unconscious mind and what are some of the tools and techniques one can use. On the slide there that you see on your screen are many of the topics that we'll talk about today. So first, one might want to ask, what is the unconscious mind versus the conscious mind? Unconscious mind is that aspect of you that is responsible first and foremost for running and preserving your body. Running and preserving your body. It carries body memory, if you will. Unconscious mind is responsible for repressing unresolved negative emotions, and it stores and functions all memories on some kind of an organized fashion so that you can retrieve it later on what's called your timeline. Everybody has a different timeline. Timelines sometimes go from this way to this way, or sometimes go from that way to that way, through you or in front of you. Everyone has a different timeline, and we can work with that timeline in order to create lasting positive change. For example, has anyone ever felt like life is always an uphill battle? You know, like whatever you're doing, it just feels like it's an uphill battle. You know, I've had a patient like that, and what we did in a very simple way was when we elicited her timeline, we found out that her future was that way. It was in front of her and directly up, and her past was behind her, and it was tilted down. And so we made a very small change, and we tilted that timeline so that it was balanced and level. And after the session, she just felt like she could go directly into time without resistance. It's just one small example. That's an example of a time empowerment technique. Hypnotherapy is a technique that I've been using for the last 4 to 5 years now. I've worked with, if I count all the people I've done hypnosis, hypnotherapy, timeline therapy, and NLP, all put together, it would be at least 1,000 people. Using hypnosis to help in pain management, for example. I can think of several cases where I've helped a patient of mine or patients of mine who have pain disorders. And yes, there is a physiological basis of the pain, and there is a mental and emotional component of the pain. And when you are able to address that part using hypnosis, giving the suggestions that you're imagining this river of anesthesia flowing through your arm all the way through into your blood, right to that place where that discomfort is, and begin to notice it cooling down and calming down. And as you can imagine, doing this for 50 minutes, literally getting like an anesthesia effect in the person that's working with me here. Amazing. Depression and negative emotions is the biggest thing. I mean, so many people have limiting beliefs and limiting decisions on themselves. I worked with somebody just 2 weeks ago, actually. She met me in the weight loss group that we have here and came in and had a session with me with the belief that she is not worthy, and how painful it feels to live your life and really believe that you are not a worthy person. Imagine how that feels, And in one session, by accessing her unconscious mind and doing what we call a submodality belief change. Now that sounds like big words, but the simple explanation is to be able to go into the DNA of how she represents that thought in her mind, and to tweak that DNA. So you're making small changes here, small changes there, And making it so that a thought like, I am not worthy, is equal to a thought like, I am Santa Claus. You know, something that you can literally just roll your eyes at and just laugh at the absurdity of it. Imagine how powerful that is in one session, being able to change a core belief into something that is absolutely absurd and never believe that thought again. That is powerful. That is working with the unconscious mind. Unconscious mind is really creation, creativity, imagination. It is the world of music. It is the world of your dreams. It is the world of feeling and emotion. If you will, it's right brain. Many of you are aware of the left brain with the brain imaging we do here, and many of you are working with psychiatrists. Some of you are working with me and working on the hardware, if you will, of your psyche, your brain, and properly adjusting it so that you have a fair shot at making the software work as optimally as possible using the techniques that we talk about, that I talk about. With timeline therapy, I've used timeline therapy for at least 150 people in giving positive, long-lasting change in a positive way, using it in various contexts. So you can use these techniques in any of these contexts: health and fitness, personal growth and development, relationships, family, career, and spirituality. If you think about it, everything in life fits in those 6 categories, doesn't it? When you have conflicts in any of those places, especially if they are conflicts revolving around negative emotions that may have been installed sometime in the past, the root causes in the past, you use the timeline therapy technique of visualization and guided by my voice into floating up above your timeline and floating into the past. Even as I say this to you right now, notice the direction my hand just moved. Floating up into the past. So my past, if you ask Larry Momaya, is that way. So that is to my left. And my future, if you ask me, is that way, to my right. To my right. So I have a timeline that goes from left to right. So anytime I talk about events in time or memories, my hands naturally move that way. I'm not even consciously thinking about it, right? We use timeline therapy. For example, I think of Eddie's case, who was a patient of mine. He's 24 years old. He has been working with me for 6 years now. I've known him for 6 years. I should say he stopped working with me a year ago once we cured him of his depression disorder and his pain disorder. I haven't seen him again other than coming back and just thanking me. Eddie has a fascinating case. Eddie is somebody who came to me with a diagnosis of depression and anxiety and questionable bipolar disorder and ADD and substance abuse. I mean, for a kid having all this stuff, and came in with medications on board. Very difficult case. We see difficult cases here usually. And then somehow along the road developed a pain disorder. And it's not a pain disorder that someone would be proud of. Actually, no pain disorder is to be proud of or to have pride in, right? That's the way you use language. Eddie had a pain disorder that involved a very strange pain. It was rectal pain, actually. And there was no identifiable trauma. And he would have 10 out of 10 pain when he's sitting in my office, almost just squirming in his chair that he can't stand it anymore. And his mom would always be in the sessions with me, and I took that very seriously, and it's something that should be addressed with medical attention first, seeing a neurologist or proper medical exam, just to make sure there's no lesions or anything they should be concerned about physically, medically. But there was nothing there, and he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And in my experience, there are a lot of patients that are diagnosed with MS that don't have MS. It sort of ends up being a diagnosis where someone doesn't know what's going on and they use MS as a diagnosis, especially if there's something neurological. And I wasn't convinced, especially when his neurologist started giving him pain medications, one after another after another. And by the age of 23, this kid was on a fentanyl patch, which many of you know is 10 to 14 times more potent than morphine, taking Vicodin pills, and really headed down a wrong pathway. In my opinion, headed down a destructive pathway that probably would have a very dangerous outcome, because opiates tend to have pain tolerance and medication tolerance. So you develop dependence, tolerance, and withdrawal. That's the signs of dependence to any medication. So I told Eddie, I'm like, dude, we got to do something about this because you're headed down the wrong path. And because I had rapport, I could talk to him very openly and honestly, and he trusted me. And we used a combination of timeline therapy to release the negative emotions that were involved in his pain disorder, as well as hypnosis to let that river of anesthesia flow to the area and to fill him instead with love and healing energy to heal him. And the end story, the positive outcomes, and I love the positive outcomes, is he is off of all prescription medicines, including all pain medications, no pain anymore, no diagnosis of MS, and he's a happy, normal, happy kid. And he just came back to visit me with his mom just to say hi and just to thank me. And that's how powerful using your brain for a change, using the power of your unconscious now can really help you and make positive, long-lasting change. I know a lot of you are here. You've joined through the Amen Solution, and joined because you have issues with weight management. And I strongly suggest, when we're done with the talk, I'll scroll through another slide, that you pick up a copy of End Emotional Overeating Now, if you haven't already. That goes into all of these techniques I'm talking about in the context of emotional overeating and weight management. I like to say weight management or weight donation instead of weight loss. And many of you have heard me say this because when you use words, the words you're using are not defining you. The words you use describe you. They limit you. Words you use define you. They don't describe you. And you want to use positive language as much as possible in your life. And it's a constant practice. I do this myself. When I catch myself using negative language, even though with a positive intent, I correct myself quickly. So when you catch yourself saying never or don't or do not, instead of saying what you do not want, state what you do want. State what you always want instead of what you never want, right? So rather than saying, I don't want to be fat, I don't want to be poor, I don't want to be unhappy, the words you use instead can be, I do want to be healthy and slender, I do want to be wealthy, and I do want to be happy. Even though on the surface, both sound like the same message, unconsciously, there are two different things. One is moving away from a negative, and one is moving towards a positive. And I encourage you as much as possible to use positive language so that your unconscious mind is already putting in your mind images of what you do want. Because the images you put in your mind are the most powerful images of what you will achieve, what you will get, whether they're good or whether they're bad. It's another reason why listening to people, watching the news, being around negativity and allowing it to affect you and influence you is something that, here I'm about to do it, I would not do. That's a double negative, so it's kind of a positive. So instead, positive messages, inspirational messages, positive things that you can hear or watch, positive people you can be around, and focusing on the positive is best as much as possible. With weight, I prefer not to use the word weight loss because the unconscious mind might hear loss, and when it hears loss, what's the first thing you think of doing when you lose something? Oh wow, I can hear through the webcam. Somebody just said, you try to find it. That's right. So rather than losing something and then later trying to find it, in other words, gaining it back, if you donate your weight, and you use the words weight donation, your unconscious mind knows when you're donating something, you are giving it up lovingly, never expecting to get it back. So I encourage you to change your language into a way that works for you. Also, that brings me to the subject of Charlie. I write about Charlie in my book, and there's a second part to all of this that's not in the book because it's happened since the book was written. Charlie came and saw me when he was 350 pounds, and he came here with a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, coronary artery disease, morbid obesity, obviously, sleep apnea, and high cholesterol. For many people who have morbid obesity, this is not a surprise. And he came here out of fear, really, because he needed to make a change. Otherwise, the outcome wouldn't be good. And the very first meeting we did like to dislike, which is a technique that many of you have seen me do live in the demos of the weight loss group that we have here, the weight donation group. They call it a weight loss group. You can use whatever words you want for this one. He saw, I did the technique of like to dislike, where I helped him eliminate butter once and for all out of his diet. This is a man who would put butter on everything. He ate bread and rolls and cooking with butter, and just not good stuff. So we did the technique which works on the unconscious mind, which turns a food you like into something you greatly dislike. So for example, I don't remember what his dislike was. It might have been, let's just say, I think it was some kind of a seafood. Many people have like squid or oyster or something gross. A lot of people have beets. Several people last time when I did the live demo followed along and got the results just by watching me do this with someone else. This is how powerful the power of your unconscious is, and the power of suggestion is. So Charlie did it with me. He eliminated butter right there in that session. He was convinced about the power of his unconscious mind and of our positive rapport that we had with each other, and that we could work with each other for a change. So Charlie came back and saw me, and he was committed to losing this weight, to donating the weight. He was committed to doing this. So he came and saw me, and I only like to really work with people one-on-one when I know somebody is 100% ready and willing to give up their problem. Because I could be the best timeline therapist in the world, but if the person is not ready to release their problem, not ready to give it up, they're not quite ready yet, it's not going to work. So I have to get into reframing and making sure that the person's on board with me and willing and ready to give up their problem. So Charlie was. Charlie did values work with me, which is talking about his value and motivators in life. And when we did that, we saw that a lot of his motivations were coming out of a negative frame, as I talked about earlier, the negative and positive. He wanted to lose weight because he didn't want to die, because he didn't want to abandon his family, because he didn't want to be sick. You know, all the language, again, was negative motivators. When we did work on values, they shifted, and they all became positive instead. They had the intention of being positive, and the language was positive. He wanted to be there for his family. He wanted to be healthy and fit. He wanted to be there for his family. We did timeline therapy. We released the negative emotions that were involved in his problem. He came back, and then he was done. He was gone. And about 8 months later, which was about 3 months ago from now, notice my hand moved that way again, he came back and saw me, and he'd lost 80 pounds. And it was very interesting to me because he lost 80 pounds, and I was wondering, why didn't he lose the other 100 that he wanted to lose? You know, like, what stopped him from losing more weight? And it was our connection we had, and we got some answers really beautifully from his unconscious mind, which was, in his mind, it was structured such that if he was to lose 80 more pounds, he would be going back. His body remembered being at that weight where 20 years ago he was that weight, and his wife was dying of cancer. And that brought up a lot of feeling in him in my office right here, that it was traumatic actually for him. So unconsciously, his body recognized that if he were to lose any more weight, he would be going back to a weight that he was at 20 years ago that associated him with a traumatic time in his life. And obviously, no one wants to re-experience trauma, because that's not a good thing. So we did a trauma release technique, completely different work, and very empowering. So he sat right here in my office, and we did this session that lasted about an hour, where the trauma was gone. The memories were there. He can still remember what happened in the past, but now it's no longer traumatic. It's no longer bringing up all these negative emotions again. It's no longer fearful even thinking about it. So that was a few months ago. We did the work, and I'll see him probably in 8 months again, probably at 108, 60 pounds or something, what his target weight was, what he wanted to be. So we can do work for traumas. We can do work for phobias. Makes me think of someone else. I'll call her Kathy, someone who had a fear of bridges, just right here off the 405 and the 73 freeway. Some of you who know the 73 north merges with the 405 north, and just driving over that, she would be gripping the steering wheel in fear to the point of panic because she's driving on a bridge. And we did one session for her, and she completely forgot she even had the trauma when she came back, and the phobia, sorry. When she came back and saw me in my office and I asked her about it, she just totally forgot, and she would be driving over the bridge and didn't even remember she had the phobia. It's really powerful stuff, tapping into the power of her unconscious. So now that we've talked about why it's useful, and we've talked about what it is, the unconscious mind is, we've talked about how you can access the unconscious mind. Hypnotherapy is one, timeline therapy is another, NLP or neuro-linguistic programming is another, and these are all techniques that you can do. It helps to do it with somebody who is trained and has a lot of experience using these techniques. Many of you can simply just make a consultation appointment here and come and see me in my office, and we can sit together and go over what your specific conflict is, what the problem is, and how you can break the pattern. This is all about pattern interruption, breaking negative patterns, really. At the deepest level, that's what it is. All change, learning, and behavior is unconscious. All change, learning, and behavior is unconscious. Very interesting. I want to open up the forum to questions. As I find sometimes just talking, giving a lecture, may not be as helpful as answering your specific questions. So you guys are all able to ask questions on the screen, and I can answer them as I receive them. So the forum is open to you now. As I'm doing that, I will also see what else needs to be covered from the slide there. Negative emotions, limiting beliefs. Feel free to send your questions my way. Just type them in and I will answer them as I receive them. So I'm looking on my screen here, and I'm going to keep talking until I hear from you guys. We talked about the future work of, actually we didn't talk about that yet. We talked about the past, getting to the root cause of negative emotions. And let's see. So somebody asked, What's the best therapy? And that's the answer. It just sort of rings true, you know, and it might ring a bell for a lot of you. Let's do this. You guys can look at that and focus on that. That is the book and program that I created with Dr. Amen, and Emotional Overeating Now, and goes into all these techniques that I'm talking about on this webinar for you guys. It's available on the Amen Clinic website as well as in the clinic and on Amazon.com, by the way. Social phobia. You know, I'll give you a story about this. Sometimes social phobia is real, and sometimes it's not. Now, a lot of the things I say, I would be saying a lot more if I was in my office with somebody one-on-one than I would say on a webinar. And that is because I always respect everyone's model of the world. In my office, I'm concerned about the model of the patient that's sitting in front of me because I want their problem to disappear. And if it means I have to shake up their model of the world a little bit so that we can find a solution, I will. Because what you believe is going to become true for you. Whether it's the truth or not is less of a concern as whether you believe it or not. Because if you're believing something that's not working for you and causing you a problem, then we don't want that anymore, right? If you have a belief system that doesn't work for you, I can never get better. I am always going to be overweight, for example. That thought doesn't work for you. So if you want to destroy that thought or disarm that thought or disable that thought, we would do it. Because what do you think is going to help you better in your weight management goals? Keeping the thought, I'm always going to be overweight, or no longer believing that anymore? You see what I mean? So with social phobia, quote unquote, I have a story of somebody who, quote unquote, had the diagnosis of social phobia when he came and saw me. Every time he would meet somebody, all of a sudden his body would get into the fight or flight response. His hands would get really sweaty and sweaty and uncomfortable for him. His heart starts beating really fast. And what was interesting, what was discovered is, and he would get this really unhappy, sad demeanor all of a sudden when before he was totally fine. So it almost looked like he would go off and on, off and on. The second he meets somebody and he had his social phobia kick in, he'd get a negative reaction. And what was discovered was that when his mother passed away and he was at the funeral and people would come up to him and shake his hand, he associated, his unconscious mind, his body associated that negative emotion with a handshake. Okay, so think about this for a minute. It's like Pavlov's dog. Every time you're reminded of something negative, someone shakes your hand. This is called an anchor. Now, years later, going out and shaking someone's hand every time unconsciously triggers that feeling again. And he didn't know why. Then there's a way of undoing it, using the unconscious mind to collapse that anchor. And it takes work and time. It's not always just done in one session. Many times they're not done in just one session. Some things are simple. They can be done in one session. Some things take a little bit more time and work. But it's not years of work. It's not dragging it on, talking about your problem month after month after month, year after year after year, and nothing ever changing, but just repeating your story and venting it to somebody. That's very different than what we do, what I do. Let's see. What does somebody else have a question on? Oh my God, they're all blowing up here. So everybody all of a sudden asking their questions at once, and I can't read my screen that small. So this is going to be a challenge, but I'll do my best. Okay, here we go. Thank you, by the way, for everyone who's watching and participating and being attentive and learning something. I appreciate that. Okay. So someone asked, there's a lot of private questions, so I don't read names. In fact, you guys might be able to read each other's names, I'm not sure, but I won't repeat anyone's name. Somebody asked, do you have a book that goes through how to use these techniques? It's right on the screen, right there. There's the like to dislike technique, how to remove butter, for example, which some of you, oh my gosh. I did a session for someone on removing bread, gluten, basically gluten fruits, anything that involves flour. And I did it as a live demo here, and for white bread, and I know her name, I could see her face, I won't say her name on the webcam. She got the result, and I'm convinced she got the result. I'll check in with her next time I see her, or many of you who know her can check in with her. But she got the result, there was no doubt in my mind. And the people watching got the result too. Eliminating bread and gluten foods is one of the best things you can do for weight donation. I just talked to one of my patients today. He's on the webinar right now. I won't say his first name. He came in today and saw me in his office. He was so happy. I was so happy for him. I've known him for 8 years now. He lost he's 300 pounds. He lost 14 pounds in the last 2 months, eliminating wheat, eliminating flour. Just that alone. No exercise, no other changes, but just eliminating one problematic ingredient. It causes an inflammatory response in the body, and he's done. Then I said, just imagine exercise, and on top of that, here's the funny thing. A lot of people think gluten-free is the way to go. When you go to a restaurant and you say you want gluten-free, that's a mistake. Yeah, you do want gluten-free, but you don't want gluten-free, because that just means it's substituted with cornstarch or potato starch, which is high glycemic, empty carbohydrates. Okay, I'm going into conscious mind now, and I'm giving you conscious mind opinions. Let's stick to the unconscious now, shall we? So, eliminating gluten foods, for example. You can use the technique in, I believe it's chapter 7 of the book, Like to Dislike. Disconnecting a bad relationship, ending a bad relationship. The Pepsi woman drank for 55 years, drank Diet Pepsi. Done in one session, eliminated. I could just go on and on and on about stories like that. So I encourage you to check it out. It's in the book. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh my gosh, so many questions. I can't even get to them all. Oh, thank you. Kathy, I can say that name because that's a very sweet comment you just gave me. Thank you. Fear of going to stores. That is a limiting decision and or a negative emotion that could be eliminated with hypnosis / time empowerment techniques and or NLP. I can't, the funny thing is I want to say I guarantee I can do it, and I guarantee my end of the bargain, my end of the stick, that I have techniques and tools that can help the problem, but I can't guarantee someone after they leave my office if they're going to be letting their problem go. My hope is that they are, and they came in here because they wanted to let their problem go. Some majority of the time, all of this works really effectively and their problems are gone, and sometimes people go and they didn't really want to let their problem go. And for that, for example, perfect example, smoking cessation. I do sessions for people, hypnosis sessions for stop smoking. And this man came in and wanted to stop smoking, and I asked him, do you want to stop smoking? And he is, yes, I do, doctor. Okay, great. So we did a wonderful hypnosis session. He's just imagining his lungs being clear. He's a clean breather now. He's no longer wanting cigarettes, wants to spit them out, throw them all away. Everything's great. Come back and sees me for a follow-up in about a month. And I asked him, so, how's the clean breathing? And notice I didn't say non-smoking, because that's a negative non-smoking. But in your mind, to think of yourself as a non-smoker, you have to think of yourself as a smoker and not doing it. Get it? So, as a clean breather, and it worked for a few weeks. And then it all came back. And I asked him why. And I asked him specifically, did you want to stop smoking? And he said, yes, I do, doctor. Yeah, do you want to stop smoking? Well, you know, my wife doesn't like it, and my kids can't stand when I'm smoking. Right, there we go. So did you want to stop smoking? Well, no, I kind of like smoking, but my wife and kids want me to stop. And that's what it is. The person didn't himself, self-initiated, want to give up the cigarettes. And there can be many reasons why, and we can go into that if you're in my office and we're seeing you for a session. So, one of my biggest triggers for emotional overeating is transitioning from one activity to another. I can't relate that to any other emotion or time in my life. That's interesting. I would probably use an NLP technique for that called a swish pattern, which is very rapidly just whoosh, sort of, I mean, this stuff sounds like magic, guys. And I do this work with integrity and really believing what I'm doing because I see the results in my own patients. I will use a different example for that just to give you an example. I just recently, 2 weeks ago, I worked with a young lady. She's a patient of mine who has pseudo-seizures. So I'm sure some of you have heard of pseudo-seizures. They're not real seizures. They're triggered by anxiety and stress, and all of a sudden she starts convulsing, and her body starts shaking, and the other medical doctors, I should say, psychiatry is a medical profession, the other medical doctors told her that there's nothing they can do, and it's all in your head, you need to go see a shrink, and blah, 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 blah. Which is true, all in your head, and she did need to see me. We eliminated unnecessary medications, and then we did a swish pattern. And I like to stack different patterns on top of each other. So I'll throw in a little hypnosis, I'll throw in a this, I'll throw in a timeline, I'll throw in some linguistic patterning. And right after that, it's funny because all the office staff here at the Amen Clinic have seen this. She came into the front office, started having pseudo-seizures in the waiting room. And the way you know it's pseudo-seizure is she has to plan it out where she's going to fall and lay down and start convulsing. So she planned it out. She went and sat inside of the little child room inside of there where there was no one in there, and she started her fits. I encouraged her to change the language from pseudo-seizure to fits, having her fits, not having a seizure. Changing the language again, really important. And so people started seeing her having these fits in the room, and she came to my office, and we did some techniques and made the problem go away. And then she came back for follow-up. Problem is gone. And there's no medication, there's no pill that would make that go away. She was taking up to 6 milligrams of lorazepam, Ativan, to try to make that problem go away. It wouldn't go away. All she was doing was getting addicted to Ativan from another doctor, by the way, not from me. So for triggers or for behaviors specific behaviors that are highly context dependent, we can do another technique, accessing the unconscious mind, using your mind for a change, to make the problem go away. I've done this with people who pull their hair. I had a young lady who used to twirl her hair and pull it and break her hair literally. We did this actually. It's just fascinating, great case. It was somebody else for nail biting. That's a common one. Or pulling out your hair, that's another one. So yes, we could do the trigger or the problem of transitioning from one activity to another and making the problem go away. Let's see, the emotional eating. Somebody asked a long question, but wants to know if I could treat her and her husband together. That is not, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be treating two people at the same time. When I'm doing a session, I'm working with one person's unconscious mind. We all have a different unconscious mind. Everybody is wired differently. Even two children, twins, growing up in the same home, are going to have a different experience, right? Their genetics are the same, but one kid walked into the backyard and the other one walked upstairs, and both had two different experiences, and you go through life with two different sets of experiences. You have a different unconscious mind. You have a different set of patterns that, different set of experiences that have affected you. So I work for success. I work to get my patients the results, and to do joint sessions with two people, the success is not going to be as likely. Now, I know I talked about the food craving thing that I've done, and the group all responded. That's a little bit different than doing a couples thing. But again, it depends on the specific problem. So for that, as well as for the majority of the questions I'm getting on screen, I would schedule a consult appointment with me by calling the clinic, and I'll put the clinic number. Actually, why don't we do that right there? Calling the clinic and scheduling with my assistant a consultation appointment, and that appointment could be a half an hour to an hour. I would suggest an hour so that we can get more to the depths of what the problem is, and preferably in person if you live locally. And if not, you can ask me the question on Skype or on the phone. And I'll give you my guidance and my suggestions specifically for you. Can we do these techniques on Skype? Probably not. I've done the like to dislike technique with the food cravings on Skype. We could do a belief change on Skype, but something like timeline therapy or hypnotherapy, I would need that person to be in person, because there's a lot of elements that are going on that are nonverbal that I really want to be able to observe somebody and give them feedback that way. All right, well, we're coming sort of to a close end here. I know everybody's wanting to hear more. Oh, that's a great question. Somebody asked this. If change, learning, and behavior belong to the unconscious, can one tap into the unconscious by learning or changing things to do or try a different behavior? So it's sort of like the inverse question. The answer is yes and no. When you're learning something new, let's say learning a guitar or how to ride a bike, in the beginning you are using your conscious mind to learn something, right? You need to learn a specific amount of steps. You need to learn, okay, I need to put my foot on the pedal and start going like this. So you need to use your conscious mind. Once you learn the behavior and master the behavior, for example, me talking about the unconscious mind now, I'm doing it unconsciously. With conscious competence, I'm unconsciously able to flow and let the information and the knowledge come out of me. That's why I didn't prepare for this talk. Some people were nervous that I didn't really prepare for this talk. I did a slide, and I trust in my own unconscious. And that's one message I would like to leave you all with, is trusting your own unconscious mind. It's a big thing. Milton Erickson, who's the father of modern-day hypnosis, said that your patients will always be your patients as long as they are out of rapport with their unconscious mind. So conscious mind, unconscious mind, forming this union, this teamwork, is a really important thing, and that's the message I'd like to leave you all with, is learning about your own unconscious mind as much as possible, working with it, having some sessions, having some hypnotherapy sessions or timeline therapy sessions, or whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be any of these things. There are other techniques and things out there that work with the unconscious mind as well. EFT, emotional freedom technique, for example, is something like that. Wherever you're able to work with somebody who you have rapport with, who can allow you to see all of your options and to feel like you're really being heard and can listen to you attentively and give you a plan, is that something you would be interested in or not? And that's the question I posed to you if you wanted to work with me. You could call the number on your screen and schedule a consult with me, and I'd be happy to go over your individual case and offer you my suggestions and my guidance on your problems. So, with that said, if you remember, veggie, vegan, sweet potato french fries. I used to eat this stuff like it was candy because it felt like candy, because it's as addictive as candy is. And since I did my own like to dislike technique, which I wrote about in my book, I've not had a sweet potato french fry since October of 2009. That's almost 3 years. And here's the key, is I never had to avoid eating in the same restaurant. I still eat there. In fact, I might go there tonight. And if you want to go there, text me. I don't have to avoid the place that serves it to me. In fact, I joke around with the people serving it to me, and they're like, oh, but you know, it's full of vitamin C. And I said, yeah, but so is a tangerine. This is fried food, and you know, it's no good. So I used this technique, and I've not had sweet potato french fries for over 3 years, close to 3 years now. And my father, bless his soul, has also made himself leave the village and create a wonderful life for himself, and meditates 4 hours a day, and used the power of his unconscious mind as well to stop smoking after 65 years of smoking cigarettes, a pack a day, for 65 years, since he was 9 years old. Using the power of hypnosis and rapport and support, and knowing that there's someone there to help, has eliminated cigarettes completely. It's been 1.5 years now. And that's a huge, huge goal. So with that, I know all of you can reach your potentials, whether it's in the context of weight management or emotions or breaking an addiction or getting over a trauma or a phobia. And I'd love to work with you. If you wished, you could call and come and see me, and I will be happy to help you, and we'll get you where you want to be. And one can reach their goals to become a greater person, so that they can have freedom in their life for themselves to live 5, 6, 7, 16-fold enhancement in their life. So thank you very much, and have a nice life. See you later. Bye.